So maybe to begin with, one of the themes that I felt was very touching in the book is, or I resonated a lot with, is the ability to think, to critically think, and rational thinking and its value. And I'm wondering if we can explore that a little bit as to what do you see is the value for a spiritual seeker? Because in my journey and having spiritual friends, I have noticed that this is not something that everybody resonates with, and not everybody questions the path so much. But I found myself to be in that position, and I've kind of made somewhat of a peace that that is the template I have, and I have to honor that within myself. But it has taken me a while to step into those shoes and recognize that, okay, this is what I do. This is very natural for me. And if other people don't want to do that, that's up to them. But if you could kindly take us a little bit into why this is important for you.
Right. Well, I can say that this is one of the main reasons why I decided to go back to the academia, which is that I spoke with some people, some scholars, friends of mine, and I realized that they are much more methodological and in examining their assumptions, their beliefs, and being willing to question them. And in light of that, I realized I have not done that with such sharp critical mind. And that's a certain, I would say that's a certain weakness I found in myself. And I thought, well, I can see that in the academia, they train you to think critically, especially, I think, of yourself. So to examine your own beliefs, your own assumptions, put them on the paper so that you can be objective about them, and so that other people can also be objective, can be aware of them. That's what, in qualitative research, it's called the researcher's positionality, which means the assumptions, the preferences, the different biases that a researcher has when approaching the topic of research. And as a researcher, you're supposed to include that, to actually have a chapter in every paper you write, saying something about your positionality and how your background, assumptions and beliefs and preferences affected the way you approached the topic and how you interpreted the data, so that the readers of the paper can take that into account when they read your paper. And I think that's a very good practice, not only for the academia, but for anybody to actually try to be as objective and clear as possible about why we believe certain things, why we assume certain things, and look at that. So that's, I think, is more what I mean. That's kind of what I mean by critical thinking. And I think I would say it's a spiritual practice because, okay, what do I mean by that? I would say that spiritual practice strips away from you whatever veils, hindrances, obscurations stand between you and reality. And being willing and able to scrutinize your own way of thinking, assumptions, worldview, conditioning, beliefs is a way of actually, I don't know if we can ever remove them, but we can, by being objective about them, that actually enables us to have more access to reality. If that makes sense to you, I don't know. Is that?
No, it does. It does, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, it's a colossal topic with many layers, I think. But in my own journey, part of my journey has been to engage in a lot of dialogues, at least the modalities I entered in. So,
right.
and having a little bit of an academic background, that seems like that's the archetypes, maybe not the best word, that using question and answer to peel the layers and self-introspection. I found that extremely, extremely valuable. But isn't there also a challenge in that at some points we have to suspend that
Yes.
introspection? And I think you touch upon that in the book brilliantly at different points. And that's where I found it a paradox, because it really is a paradox. So yeah, maybe we can go into that.
Yeah, great question. Yes, of course, it's really important to bring in that other side, which is that relying exclusively on our intellectual, critical thinking capabilities can be a big obstacle, because there are certain types of knowledge or of knowing, I would say, a more alive, embodied, experiential kind of knowing that actually requires that we put aside, at least for a while, our critical and rational thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we would not have access to that kind of knowing. So it's a real paradox, and it's not science, it's art, how to dance with those two poles. On one hand, the need for rational critical thinking, on the other hand, the need to put aside rational critical thinking in order to have access to other types of knowing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think one thing that comes to mind, Amir, is especially with academia, that's a place I spent quite a lot of time in, and often you can find people who are very good at critical reasoning and rational thinking, but surprisingly, they are still in the mode of the intellect, as you were saying, that the spiritual dimension, only a spiritual seeker can understand that, is that the other modes of knowing, as you were saying, where we discover the limits of our mind.
Right.
But it is interesting because, at least in my path, and I think you would resonate with that, is that there is a process in the spiritual unfolding where you keep discovering the limits of your mind, and the more you discover that and you reach that point, other modes of knowing become accessible.
Well, wouldn't you say, Kenan, that ultimately we want to be fully integrated and whole, which means that all aspects of our experience, our being, who we are as a personality, as an individual, and as part of the cosmos, that's all unified and whole, which means also that the different types of knowing that we have, emotional, embodied, relational, mystical, etc., and our thinking, intellectual, rational abilities are kind of aligned and in sync. So for most people, that's not the case. And I think that and a lot of people solve that problem by either saying, I am only rational, I'm relying only on the intellect, and anything that the intellect doesn't understand is nonsense, which a lot of people do.
Yes.
And the other extreme is saying, well, the mind is a big problem. Intellectual, rational thinking is the major obstacle. And in order to have access to other much more real types of knowing, that should be rejected. And which is, a lot of people in the spiritual world, that's
Yes.
how they solve that problem. And I think what both of us are kind of struggling with, or trying to come to terms with, is that no, we find that there is validity to all these types of knowing, rationality is a precious jewel, is a precious gift that enables us to actually, that forces us to be clear, and so that other people can understand us and not just either buy or not buy into the same belief system that we have, but we actually want to be able to make sense to other people. I think that's a noble intention. And so we want all that to kind of come together, and we are. It's not an easy task, but I think it's a very much a worthy task.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Yeah, it's beautiful what you said, and I couldn't agree more. As definitely in the academic circles I could see that there was a bias towards, we live in the Western world right now where there's an emphasis on rationality. Rationality is everything, and there's no other mode of knowing. And when you go to the spiritual circles, as you were saying, there's a dominance toward the other side where the mind is an obstacle, or it needs to be dismissed.
Yeah.
And as you very beautifully highlight in your book, the various dilemmas that come from that in many spiritual communities and the challenges that come with that. So the word that you used, I mean, the key is that integralness of realizing that we have this multimodal intelligence or modes of knowing. Yeah. And developing them, to me, actually, it brought a sense of excitement when that was being shown as I was reading your book, that all those things can be honored, and that all of them have their place. And it almost seems like one has a toolkit now, where one can look at, okay, these are all the tools I have, and in this particular situation, which one of those tools I can use, rather than just dismissing a whole set of intelligence just like that based on a viewpoint or even a belief.
Yeah, I'm fully with you on this.